is the largest field in England? Why are summers so shit? Why do we say summer is so shit? How did we discover that Scafell is the highest point? Why is Capability Brown rated higher than William Kent? Why are so many places called Piccadilly? What did Betjeman love about Louth? Did the Romans get literally everywhere? What's the most common pub name? What makes English whiskey different? How much ale did a medieval Englishman drink? What is the average rainfall? Why did they kill a king? Haven't the royal family always been foreign? How did Isaac Walton become famous? Who put George Devine in charge of the royal court? What's the best batter for cod? Did you know that the kiln that forged the Iron Bridge was built before the Civil War? Which is longer, the Welsh or Scottish border? How many castles still remain? How many castles are still lived in? Who do you think is the greatest English architect? Is the population of England outnumbered by its ghosts? What's the most northerly point of England? Who was the first Englishman? Where did Chaucer hide during the Peasants' Revolt? Do you think Chaucer and Richard II ever chatted? What connects Castleton in Derbyshire with Manchester's Great Bridgewater Street? Did you ever wonder why it was called the Wilton Diptych? Why do some places still have the stocks and pillory? What was so unique about Eyam? Where is the last surviving ducking stool? When did oak become the national tree? What is it about dogs? What is the longest river? If it wasn't for Teddington Lock, how far would the Thames be tidal? How long is the Humber Bridge? How many people have jumped from the Clifton Suspension Bridge? How long did it take to decide to build the Channel Tunnel? Which country is the Garden of England? Why is Warren Percy deserted? Which pub is actually the oldest in England? Is Stonehenge really that special? What's the most common crop in England? How many walkers get chased by frisky cattle? Who invented the spinning mule? How close is the nearest thatched roof to Charing Cross? After the Globe, how close is the nearest thatched roof to Charing Cross? Which pub claims to be the oldest in England? Which pub is actually the oldest in England? Could Charles really have hidden in an oak tree? Are there more pigeons than squirrels? Where would you walk the Weald? Why isn't there a minister for England? Whither English melancholy? Has the gentleness of the English countryside informed the English character? How many public benches are there in England? How many counties are there in England? Can you name them? Which county has the oldest surviving borders? What were the issues caused by geology on the Avon to Kennet Canal? What's significant about the Stanage Tunnel? How much Portland stone is left? Are there any surviving descendants of the signatories of Magna Carta? Where was the first canal in England? How far is it from the Tan Inn to the Cap and Fiddle? Is it true the Queen has never visited Bolton? Where was Vivienne Westwood's first shop? Did those feet in ancient times? Is Arthur buried under Alderley Edge? Does feet on a lion always mean death in battle? Where would you find Lambton Hill? In which month did Daniel Defoe cross Blackstone Edge in a snowstorm? Which is Frank Matcham's finest theatre? How steep is the path to Heptonstall? How do you spell Leominster? How do you spell toaster? What happened in Hut 8 at Chichester? What happened in Hut 8 at Bletchley Park? Which water tables are separated by the Rollright stones? How long would you take to walk the Ridgeway? Would you walk the Thames from mouth to source or source to mouth? What would you have painted today on the ceiling of the banqueting house? Did the Stockton to Darlington train run on time? What creates that sense of desolation at Chew Green? Can you name the 7 hills of Sheffield? Could we discover which is the oldest tree? Why did they choose Windsor? Why did they move the Crystal Palace? Would you rather work on Savile Row or Harley Street? Are Bishop's Row properties really worth it? Does Birmingham have more canals than Venice? Is Manchester's Oxford Road still the busiest bus route in Europe? Has the Rudston Stone always been the largest monolith? Who persuaded the Victorians that Tudor timber frame style was black and white? Why does Cambridgeshire thatch sweep up at the gable end? How did James Wolfenden mathematically calculate the tide tables for Liverpool when he never saw the sea? What makes the hallway of Wentworth Woodhouse the greatest room in England? What is the power of the oak trees of Sherwood? What was the beef between the Duke of Monmouth and James II? Who was the lady who danced with Claude Duval? Why was Montague Summers described as a mixture of spooks and sex and God? Do you believe that the same person that built Birmingham Town Hall also invented the hansom cab? Do you reckon the same Maurice that built the castle at Newcastle was the same one who built the one at Dover a few years later? What's the smallest city in England? What is the Leicester address allocated to Jesus for his second coming? How many miles of shelves are in the British Library? What is the other claim to fame of the library of the Cheetham School of Music? What was the first plant introduced to the Botanical Garden in Oxford? How many Carnegie libraries are there? Do you know what the 6 towns are? Can you name the 6 towns? Why did they leave Old Sarum? Can you find the fleet? Where was Bartholomew Square? What marks England's central point? How quickly is England sinking? What is the oldest picture of England? What is the oldest picture of England where you can still recognise the view? What do you understand by an English rose? How did they cope with pounds, shillings and pence? Why is the currency sterling? Whose idea was the Bank of England? Where was Beethoven's Ninth first performed? Why does the word debt have a B in it? Why does the crest of Manchester have a B in it? Elephant and Castle? What's that all about? What's significant about Preston's St Walbur's Church? Which historic sites were obliterated by the Olympic Park? How long is Chisel Beach? How long is Chisel Beach, the novel? Can you name the Tyne bridges? Isn't Grey Street the finest street in England? What is the highest aqueduct? What is the longest viaduct? What does Congleton have in common with Osterley? How many stones make up Castlerigg? What's that method for estimating the age of an English hedgerow? Have you heard of parliamentary trains? How many tops are there in the Malverns? Can you explain how they work out whether a hill is a Marilyn? How many hunting lodges did King John have? How did Tresham get away with building the triangular lodge? Do you always confuse Kettering with Kidderminster? Driving on the left? Can you name Silsden Man? Can you name Piltdown Man? What went down between Gog and Magog? Who knows where the term Cockney came from? Did anyone ever find anything in Silbury Hill? Isn't that helmet they found at Sutton Hoo quite something? How much do you think the Staffordshire hoard is worth? What should be included in a full English breakfast? Can you name the Knights of the Round Table? Is it more important to name the 6 wives of Henry VIII or to understand the significance of the schism with Rome? What's long about Long Melford? Why is George the patron saint of England? What does Honi Sonci Mali Pence mean? Who founded Eton College? Is Eton a mess? What are the Cinque Ports? How far is Dover from Calais? What does he of England know who only England knows? What's the story behind the arrow fired from Kirklees Abbey? Where did the Parmenter sisters collect the shells for Alaronde? What is a Martello tower for? Where do desire lines lead? Do you follow ley lines? Which is your favourite chalk figure? How big is the Wilmington Man's little man? Which do you think is the oldest chalk figure? How likely is it that Joseph of Arimathea made it to England? Why isn't the cor anglais an English horn? How did Herschel crack the flags? Have you ever seen Big Ben? At the Battle of Lewes, would you have been on the side of Henry or de Montfort? Which is your favourite exhibit in the British Lawnmower Museum? What are your feelings on the Passmore Pavilion? How dangerous was Tom Paine? How does the English gauge relate to Roman chariots? Did Charles Dickens get literally everywhere? What are the home counties? Can you name the home counties? Why is there a grave slab to Ebenezer Scrooge in a Shrewsbury graveyard? What happened when they read the Riot Act? What is unique about Pulteney Bridge? Where are the Palladian bridges? What's so great about Great Yarmouth? What's your favourite mineralised object at the Dripping Well? Where are the Will-o'-the-Wisp? Why are shopping centres called Arndale centres? Where did Handel and Hendrix share a house? Where were the Sally Gardens? And what went on in the Vauxhall Gardens? Why is there a Mormon cathedral in Chorley? How did Horse Guards Parade originate? Why would you bugger Bognor? Isn't Mons Meg just the best name for a cannon? What happened to the giant elephant on Leicester Square? Did you know that William Wilberforce was a campaigning anti-homosexual? How many bluebirds are there over Dover? What was the peak population of Waterloo Bridge, Cardboard City? Will there always be in England? What would Sylvia Beckingham think of the current state of the NHS? Why are Elizabeth I's feet on Oxfordshire? How many blue plaques are there now? How many people with blue plaques have you actually heard of? Who thought up the blue plaques anyway? What connects Soho with Great Asby? Who has their editorials in the Coach and Horses? Where did Marks and Spencer's start? Which way is Essex? When did Barber become fashionable? What's so glorious about the glorious 12th? What happened to platform tickets? Has there ever been sufficient building of decent social housing? Where did Roger Bannister break the 4-minute mile? What's the difference between an Eccles cake and a Chorley cake? Have you walked the path that George Fox took up Pendle Hill? How large is Nottingham's Market Square? What do mad dogs and Englishmen have in common? How do I join the 92 Club? Who is your favourite member of the Royal Academy? Do I need a tie to eat at Simpson's in the Strand? Where does Newcastle get its coal from nowadays? Why would anyone want to rebuild the Euston Arch? Where was the first area of green belt? Can you tell what county you're in by the style of farm gate? Are you proud that Trinity College, Cambridge has more Nobel Prizes than France? How did Henry acquire Hampton Court? What was Ethelred not ready for? How much of the Anglo-Saxon Chronicle do you believe? From which beach did Canute command the sea? Peak District or Lake District? Shakespeare or Dickens? Elgar or the Beatles? Tea or beer? Watford Gap or T-Bay Services? Leeds or Reading? Oxford or Cambridge? Football or cricket? Yorkshire or Lancashire? Raleigh or Drake? Charles or Diana? Morecambe or Wise? Morecambe or Whitby? Disraeli or Gladstone? Bap or Balm? Chips wet or dry? Coal or tin? How many domes does St Paul's Cathedral have? Do you still need a passport for Pimlico? Surely the dome in Buxton holds the record for something. Where's the largest piece of Blue John? Why did they pull down Paxton's greenhouse? How many graves does Grimes have? I wonder if Prynne's biography of Laud is still in print. How old is the Golden Hind? Did John Dee have a lawn like Mortlake in Manchester? Was Pepys unusual in kissing the corpse of Catherine de Valois 70 years after her death? Do you handle a rapier in the way advocated by George Silver? How sure are you that Torpenhow Hill is a hill? Couldn't Brutus have picked a more significant place to arrive than Totnes? What's so insulting about roast beef? How would Edward Thomas give his grandchildren the gift of the English countryside? Tea with milk or lemon? Scone or scone? Who taught the English how to queue? When Adam delved and Eve span, who was then the gentleman? For how long did the burnt husk of the Savoy Palace sit on the Strand? Was John Poulsen a good architect? How many floors of the Get Carter car park were unusable? Is there a study of the relationship between England and Genoa? How many of our elms were killed by the Dutch? Where is there a corner of a foreign field that is forever England? Is casual racism an essential part of the English character? Do you stand for the Hallelujah Chorus? Do you stand for the national anthem? Is Athelstanford built on a myth? Does England begin in Jarrow? Who was God's Englishman? When was the last year oak boughs were found at the statue of Charles I? Have you rolled cheese down Cooper's Hill? Can you imagine Beowulf in Malmesbury? Would you have joined the Kit Kat Club? If there's really an East Grinstead, does that mean there's a West Grinstead? What could have happened if Elizabeth I hadn't had Mary Stuart executed? Why is there an English mile? How were we tricked into calling them the Pennines? What was John Evelyn referring to with the phrase Deus et tutum? Why is it incongruous to think that Shelley wrote his first great poem in Bracknell? How Orwellian is the Senate House of the University of London? Who would play football with Jeremy Bentham's head? Isn't it astonishing that nothing has ever been found of the princes in the Tower? Did William Blake see angels amid the mulberry trees of Peckham Rye? Would you rather walk the Doom Way or the Sweet Track? How deep is Dunwich? Cavalier or Roundhead? Tory or Whig? How many Knights of the Garter are there? How many Knights of the Garter have there ever been? Where was the tombstone that Kierkegaard found, saying simply, "It is most unfortunate"? When did America find itself on top of Rosebery Topping? What good is Chatteris if you're not there? Whose horse did David Garrick and Samuel Johnson use when they left Lichfield? What did Momus believe? How quickly did Sulby Hedge change from a battlefield to a quietus? How many stories high was London Bridge? How tight a bend on Porlock Hill? Where was a nightingale recorded duetting with a cello? Who ordained that a few should have the land of Britain as a prerequisite? Where are the ashes stored when England loses? And is there honey still for tea? Who would go to Birmingham by way of Beachy Head? How did they choose the body of the unknown warrior? Who now remembers Walter Walker? What is the name of the horse that Emily Davidson ran under? Who was Gordon Bennett? Do people still race homing pigeons? What is the significance of Rolls travelling to meet Royce at the Midland Hotel? What could Cobbett have done with Tom Paine's bones? For whom did D.H. Lawrence call Garsington the real England? Do you fancy going out for a bathwater cocktail? What did Dame Nellie Melba make of Chelmsford? Who made Richard Whiteley Mayor of Wetwang? Who performed on Eel Pie Island? What happened to Victor Grayson? Metroland or Doggerland? Do you ride with the Quorn? Was Strafford executed for nothing? Are there any Thomas Chippendale chairs that you're still allowed to sit on? Why do we remember Praise God Barebones? Fred West or Harold Shipman? How do you find Tyneham? If it isn't Shakespeare's, whose is the skull at St. Leonard's Beoley? How did the Green Knight come to be living in Lud's Church? Are you going to Scarborough Fair? Land of hope and glory, mother of the free, how shall we extol thee who were born of thee? How does the water come down at the door? Do you remember Addlestrop? Why does Dr. Beeching always get it in the neck? Whereas to bin a synasoddi on Ilclamore Bartat? What oh, Mrs. Brisket, why not take a plunge and risk it? Where did John Leyland's itinerary lead him? Is it really a coincidence that Thomas de Quincey moved to a farm in what later became Moss Side? Who named a highwayman the Golden Farmer? Have you solved the mystery of the mathematics of Durham Cathedral? Who was the Protestant whore? How does Judas find himself in a Morton church? Who murdered Sir Edmund Berry Godfrey, and why? What colour is your Fred Perry polo shirt? Das Land ohne Musik? Ha ha, or ha ha? What inspired the Reverend Gilpin to create the picturesque? Has it always been a nation of shopkeepers? How many kinds of sweet flowers grow in an English country garden? Where would you find fresh water you can't drink, cows you can't milk, and needles that you can't use to sew? Have you won first prize in the lottery of life? Would you play up, and play the game? How often do you get all reticently thrilled and tinglish? How often has London Stone been moved? How did Anita Street, Manchester, get its name? Do you bite your thumb at me, sir? Is England preeminently a land of atmosphere? How would you know that you'd found the wrecking coast? Why is it called the Lizard? What did John Logie Baird first see on television in Hastings? What possessed Sir John Soane to build this house around a sarcophagus? Is Hogarth's mulberry tree original? Accrington Stanley? Who are they? What's behind Betjeman's assertion that the country is run by the RSPB? How long did it take to get an English translation of Das Englische Haus? How did Lord Gordon get to have riots named after him? Do you suffer from le voice anglais? How harrowing was the harrowing of the North? Is the Rufus Stone a clue to regicide? What were the 12 great livery companies? For how long has tikka masala been the national dish? Whatever happened to Swift's proposal for correcting, improving, and ascertaining the English tongue? Where does the expression "the dog's bollocks" come from? England expects what? Where are the middle sort of men in Tockenham? Do you fancy hunting for stones discarded in the building of St. Paul's? Has anyone preached from the pulpit rock? Have the people of England spoken yet? The world's first train season ticket to Whitstable must have been successful then. Am I the only one still upset that Marlowe died at just 29? Who are the ladies of the Vale? Do any parishes still beat the bounds? How creepy is the Helpston floral dance? Are you in for a penny, in for a pound? Is Tetley beer and Tetley tea made by the same company? How many men did Henry I's dead body really kill? What do you feel about the agonies of the shipwreck? What does Plantagenista come to? Which of the constitutions of Clarendon caused all the kerfuffle? Have you ever sat in a deck chair wearing a string vest with a knotted handkerchief on your head just for a laugh? Who'd pay $500,000 for a beach hut even in Devon? When did Englishmen lose their tails? Where do ignorant armies clash by night? How did the Carlisle experiment work? Is the Fiddler's Ferry protest still going on? Why is there no pedestrian tunnel between Liverpool and Birkenhead? What's the right reason to visit Petterheim? What did Morton find suspicious about Norfolk? Where was Lower Binford? Who rolled their eyes at Northcliffe's declaration that England is no longer an island? How many Kentish oast houses still house oasts? What's the safest time in the Curfew Gardens? Did the football pools avert a revolution? Is the topiary or the ha-ha more surreal at Levens Hall? How dare Reith fire Peter Eckersley? How popular were the kindred of Kib O'Kift? You or non-you? When they started Silbury Hill, did they know how it would finally look? Where was the biggest earthquake in England? How did William Parr get into Parliament? Where would you find the English line? How many miles to Babylon? What's the chance that Thomas Malory was at Gosford Green? Shall Scotland be tamed ere France be framed? Have not the English always betrayed their kings? Why call one of the first roads Rotten Row? Would you like your clock wound? Which house had its foundations laid by the folly of the English? How was Handel allowed to become the greatest English composer of his day? Was George II right to declare there are kings enough in England? For how many centuries was Cliveden a playground for the aristocracy? Who do the 4 oak trees at Brandlhow represent? Who was Isaac Bickerstaff, really? Where did Charles Montague find the idea for the Bank of England? What happened to the woman from Godalming who gave birth to all those rabbits? Did Jenkins get his ear back? How did we reach Gin Lane? How old was old Thomas Parr? How did the Shropshire mammoths die? Who perpetrated the Berners Street hoax? How did Lambert Simnel bring about Simnel cake? How were they all taken in by Perkin Warbeck? Is there no softwood tradition in English forestry? Can the influence of John Evelyn's Sylvia be overstated? Wouldn't you agree that the landscape garden is England's primary contribution to the visual arts? Did the Pilgrimage of Grace start at Louth? What did the diggers plant on St George's Hill? How astonishing was Colonel Rainborough's outburst at the Putney debates? Where is there a mayor's murder weapon still on display? Why did Charles II collect snails at Silbury Hill? Who'd have commented that the incomparable English habit was toast? Porridge or prunes, sir? Would you imagine Beau Brummell wearing a suit? Does Oxford stop at this station? Why are they called beefeaters? Was Blackburn justifiably known as the beeriest town in England? How long did Charlemagne want his cloaks to be? Is there an existing coin for every English monarch since Offa? Did they have a name for the European trade treaty between Offa and Charlemagne in 796? Which is the oldest written papal document to the English Church? Who should fulfil the law of riding as riding men should? Did King Edward consider William, Duke of Normandy, his rightful heir? You rang, my lord? Are you being served? Did William Prowse ever find the furling of land in Dartmoor that he mislaid? How many tally sticks does it take to burn down Whitehall? Why has no one in Lincoln today heard of Lincoln Green? Why should we remember little Hugh of Lincoln? Who called it Magna Farta? Is your nan's gravy better than your mum's? What, according to Punch, is the greatest work of fiction? Did the day trippers from Wadebridge stay in their carriage at Bodmin to watch the executions? How many did Thomas Cook take to the Loughborough Temperance Conference? Is Hardwick Hall more glass than wall? Does Clouds Hill have any windows? How wide is Squeezy Belly Alley in Port Isaac? Is Celia Fiennes the only person to ride side saddle through all of England? How did Byron's grandfather get the nickname Foul-Weather Jack? Isn't it ironic that the one art form originated in England isn't funded by the Arts Council for England? When was Bobby Charlton the most famous Englishman in the world? Why is the Fairground Archive in Sheffield? Is April Fool's Day specifically English? In what category is the Luttrell Psalter famous? What's a Sussex knucker? Which is Green Knowles' claim to fame? How is George Boole remembered? What did Ada Lovelace want to program her computer to do? How many islands are there? How many isles are there? What became of the Holy Club? Why did Bonnie Prince Charlie retreat? What does Roy Hattersley ascribe to John Wesley? Why St. George? How did Rochdale get a coconut dance? How did William Casson inspire the Afghan saying, "First comes one Englishman, then come two Englishmen and they take photographs. Then they bring an army and take the country. So better to kill the one Englishman." Where in the Berkshire countryside was the last remaining copy of the joke buried? What makes you think the Battle of Trafalgar was fought near Cudworth? And do Englishmen so soon forget the ground where liberty was fought for? Where are Churchill's 12 Oaks? Is the Enigma theme still an enigma? Can you hum the English cadence for me? By what title is Peter Marsh better known? What is the one crippling weakness of English art? What makes Edward Lear as English a genius as anyone could find? What could Albion mean if not white land? Where was known the Cassiterides? Where did Edward Williams revive Druidism? Where was the great square of Venus? Where's the lowest trig point? Where were the 5 places Richard I decreed jousts could be held? What could be more appropriate than to build a children's playground where Warwick fought Bolingbroke? Are they a race uncertain? How did Thomas Sydenham come to be known as the English Hippocrates? For what is Jethro Tull most famous? Who saw England smiling with cultivation? Was Pitt right to call war with France, breaking window with guineas? What happened to Lloyd George's Doomsday? What's the most annoying thing about Edward's Shorter English Dictionary of Furniture? How many streets in Monopoly can you point to on a map? Blackpool or Southport for Wakes Week? Butlins or Pontins? What did Brown and Blair order at Granita? Who did the Angry Brigade bomb first? Who were the 2 bald men fighting over a comb? How many Wombles can you name? What was the address of the secret hideout of Danger Mouse? Ivor the Engine or Thomas the Tank Engine? Who was the Tichborne complainant? Ant or Deck? Did Drake win his game of bowls? Who were the victims of the Dreadnought hoax? Cheddar or Stilton? When is Rutland England's smallest county? What is your favourite Asbo? What was in the box of delights? What actually was grog? Who decided strips of toast should be called soldiers? Why did Horace Walpole think all the English must be ducks? How many centres of England are there? Which 2 towns 22 miles apart mark the ends of England's longest ever traffic jam? What make of car did robbers use to ram raid Hever Castle in 1946? Who won a campaign to serve kippers on the London to Brighton train? How far did the monk Elmer of Malmesbury fly? What doesn't fly over the white cliffs of Dover? From where would Alfred Noyes think the life of England lives by the sea? How was Cliff Richard involved in the invention of the Chinese takeaway? Who lived in Elizabethville? Who invented the Great Panjandrum? What was the result of the famous football match in No Man's Land? During World War II, it was HMS Lee, but what do you know it as? Which stately home was the model for Lady Penelope Crichton Ward's home? How many sat down to dinner atop Nelson's column? Who was convinced by the Cottingley fairies? Why does the man appear to ride in Norfolk? Who were the 9 at the funeral of Karl Marx? Why is Sylvia Plath buried in Heptonstall? Can you guess the origin of the term chatting? The English, are they human? Is England still the most class-ridden nation under the sun? Does the English national character put tradition above all? What was the name of the kindergarten which Diana Spencer worked at? Why is it your right to be Burgundian? How did a piece of the Houses of Parliament end up in Clitheroe? What was Carlyle's condition of England question? Who considered that England has no bad weather, only different kinds of good weather? Why is the English form of Narodism thought to be more gentle? Which organisation has an advisory committee on spoken English? Who thought Julius Caesar built the White Tower? What would be instructive about the chronology of rice pudding? Might Toy Town turn out to be the grand original of those imaginary Englands which did so much to sustain national morale during the Second World War? Why put a copy of Big Ben in the Langdale Valley? How should an Englishman utter the word Great Britain with the glow of emotion that for him goes with England? Is English older than England? Who abducted Elizabeth Canning? What did Thomas Watson rate in Albion's Isle? What for Father Poussin were the pretty doings in a Protestant nation? Please, sir, can I have some more? What did Caroline Norton go through for the infant custody bill? Who were the radicalist set of fellows in the radicalist town in England? From what roots did Lavinia Fenton become Duchess of Bolton? Where was Satan's harvest home? What is the sexiest accent? What will the ram of the Castle of Love do to us? With whom would you bond in frank pledge? Who ultimately suffered the consequences of the Treaty of Windsor? When did we stop rubbing the donkey stone? How many people were rather worried about Jim? What's specifically English about the high valuation placed on virginity? How many Englishmen lived in 13th century Acre? Which bishop proclaimed God was English? What happened to England at Bosworth in 1485? What made depression the English disease for Dr. Cheney? When did the Irish first notice the English? Francis Bacon, philosopher or painter? Is an acre in Middlesex better than a principality in Utopia? When was football coming home? What was made in Chelsea? What is the most popular ice cream van tune? Is anything missing from this sequence? Breakfast, brunch, elevenses, lunch, high tea, dinner, supper, midnight snack. The London Marathon ends on the Mole, but where does it start? Who has won the most university boat races? Which is considered the most beautiful cricket ground in England? How many of the 92,107 subjects touched by Charles II were reported cured? Which fire did the town's mayor think so insignificant that a woman might pit it out? Who built a machine to pump smoke into the rectum? Why does it rain cats and dogs? How early is noon in Bristol? Where was the world's first industrial estate? How quickly have we forgotten that Johnson is slang for penis? I know what effing is, but what's jeffing? What will happen to Dancing Ken's house? What did John Clare think grass tasted like? How many inns which aren't pubs are there? Who named the Fosbury Flop? Who owns Watership Down? When would you pass a baby through a rind of cheese? How many were going to St Ives? What is the cup size of Northumberlandia? Is Midsummer the most dangerous place in England to live? Who would wear a Newcastle coat? Where would you first spend a penny? Which is the widest high street in England? Could the Stockton Flyer be any louder? Did the Lambton worm settle round Lambton Hill or Worm Hill? Does the old man on the moor remind you of anyone? Do the English fetishize irony? Who were the Knights of the Hare? How did the heron kickstart the 100 Years' War? What happens on Mufti Day? How did Edward II die? What did the Vicar of Bray do to merit a song? Who said Humpty Dumpty was an egg? How many postcards does it take to cover England? Where was the Corby trouser press invented? Why is there a crater on the moon named after Corby? Whose is the Yard of Hair in Wellingborough? What crime was Sergeant Hector MacLeod pursuing in the first ever arrest following a car chase? When did it stop being illegal to be an incorrigible rogue? Does the plague unveiled by Giles Brandreth still exist? Who knitted the clangers? Who got sent to Coventry? Who posted themselves to 10 Downing Street? Why did Hendrix think Watford Gap was a nightclub called the Blue Boar? Of what was it remarked, if the Englishmen call this playing, it would be impossible to say what they call fighting? Who occupied the debatable lands? Where was the Parisian Boulevard inspired? How do Lancashire police now use the Bath Buck Ruxton dismembered his victims in. The Halifax gibbet was the first version of what better-known implement? Which wing are badminton feathers always taken from? How long is the boundary between Lincolnshire and Northamptonshire? If you asked for a pint of champagne in a pub in Dungeness, what would the locals think you were? Where is England's only desert? Which town is placed to gratify friends and annoy enemies? Where are the 39 steps? What are St. Lubbock's days commonly known as? What's behind the rhyme Sutton for mutton, Kirby for beef, Southstone for gingerbread, Dartford for a thief? How much did the last bag of Woolies Pick and Mix cost? How many sundials are set to British summertime? Who wears the crown whilst English is English? Why does Disraeli share a grave with Mrs. Williams? What inspired Chateaubriand to declare the waves are part of England? Where are the earliest footprints outside of Africa? Can you fit in the nutshell? How can you tell who was the first royal on a stamp? How many cats were employed by the post office? How did George Formby get his sight? Where is the original Gotham? Who had an Uncle Bob? In which prison was the toothbrush invented? How long after her death was Hannah Beswick safe to be buried? From where was Paul Simon homeward bound? Where was Bob Dylan declared a Judas? What job do the peregrine falcons do at Jodrell Bank? How was Churchill's coffin used to annoy Charles de Gaulle? Where is the only hotel suite with its own postcode? Does the hotel that inspired Fawlty Towers still exist? What is significant about the village of Bricklehampton? How many thankful villagers are there? How many villagers are doubly thankful? Is it ant on the right and deck on the left? Who is the peephole at Langtree Manor Hotel for? Who are the only two people to have colleges named after them at both Oxford and Cambridge? Which Michael Jackson hit was written by Rodney Temperton from Cleethorpes? Who filled Wembley Arch with Middlesbrough FC shirts and scarves? Who was refused entry to the Nick Owen Lounge at Luton FC? What is marked by the beach at Tunstall? How many times does Great Tom chime? How many feathers does the winged bee emblem have? Where does Ernie live? How many water speed attempts ended in disaster for Mr. Woppet? Do you agree that where continental people have sex lives, the English have hot water bottles? Who bought fragments of Alice's Meadow Otmore? Where did your Roman, Saxon, Danish, Norman, English originate? Why couldn't Mrs. Beeton bring herself to use the word trousers? How many Pokemon are there in England? Grange Hill or Waterloo Road? Where is Wallace and Gromit filmed? Where is Wallace and Gromit set? How much do Russians like Salisbury Cathedral's spire? What organisation is based under St Hope's School? Who were the Bristol Savages? What's Gert Lush? Who did Horace Riddler become? Where are the best bridges? What connects Cary Grant and Paul Dirac? Is Massive Attack still that massive? Whose favourite word was elbow? What is aimed at Scratchwood services? Barbara Woodhouse or Mary Whitehouse? When did The Fall become a Salford band? Who lived in Merlin's Cave, Salford? Who made It's a Long Way to Tipperary so popular? Did you know Hilaire Belloc was MP for Salford? What did Basil Jellicoe achieve by the age of 35? What happens in Nissan huts? What started on Clockhouse Way, Braintree? Who actually was Andrew Preview? What's the deal with change ringing? What was Kemp's 9 Days Wonder? Who got a brand new combine harvester? What was number 1 when you were born? Where was the original Coronation Street? What was the first district in the E20 postcode area? Is there a real bookshop at 13 Little Bevan Street? What do you see in the opening credits of Peep Show? Do you agree that in England the pleasures of smell are great?